This is the Lawyer Dana Show. We are live from CPAC in Maryland, pretty much Washington, D.C. We're at the Gaylord National, what is it?
National Resort.
And
Right
this
off the
is
Potomac River.
the biggest conservative convention of the year. We are going to have J.D. Vance opening the ceremonies here in just a little bit, and we are going to cover that live. We have full media credentials. We are just as qualified here as Fox News, Newsmax, CBS, ABC, NBC. We've basically been made, and this is the biggest thing that our podcast has done to date, and we aim to not disappoint you. We've got 3 different camera angles. We've got a lot of exclusive interviews, and it's going to be fantastic. And so we've got me, got our co-host Zach Barrett. We have another one of our co-hosts, obviously our lovely Jennifer Hardy-Har, and we've got Kareth Foster. We're entering a new era for this podcast, and you're going to love it. So like, subscribe, turn on your alerts, because we're going to be broadcasting live a lot, and we're going to try and probably break it up just a little bit, different perspective, different times. So stay tuned. Now, so we're going to start our first guest, Thomas Haviland.
Yes.
And Thomas has been doing some critical research. We're going real controversial right now. And for the sake of YouTube, so that you don't strike us, just a matter of opinion, just having a discussion. We're not saying what it is, what it's not. We're going to leave that to the audience to conclude. But can we bring Tom in?
Sure.
All right.
Absolutely.
Here we go. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Dana, for having me on the show.
Come on in.
How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. So, Tom, tell us what it is that you do.
I'm a retired U.S. Air Force major. Spent 20 years in the United States Air Force, then 16 years as a defense contractor working with the Air Force.
Wow.
Yeah, it all actually abruptly stopped, though, in October of 2021 because I refused to take the COVID-19 vaccine. I was a defense contractor working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio.
So Trump has said he's going to reinstate with back pay. Is that true? Is that happening? Or have you been contacted?
No, because I was a defense contractor, not active duty military.
Got
you. But God bless him, 8,000 servicemen and women who were kicked out of the military for not taking the jab have now been reinstated.
They have been reinstated.
Yeah, and they're going to get full back pay.
That is incredible.
In addition to that, Donald Trump recently did another executive order saying that he's going to ban federal funding from any school K through 12 or any university that mandates the COVID vaccines on their students.
Excellent.
So Donald Trump understands that this should have been a thing that should have been not coerced, but it should have been, people should have been given the choice as to whether they wanted to take the vaccine or not.
Well, and with informed consent.
Absolutely.
But how do you get informed consent? Well, you're going to talk about this in a second. I know what you're going to talk about. Yeah. And you got something in your pocket that, I want you to talk about this. This is incredible.
Yeah, what I've got here in a small vial is white fibrous clots that embalmers all around the world have been finding in the veins and arteries of corpses, Dana. And for most of them, it started in the year 2021. There were a few that said they saw it in the year 2020, which is interesting. That's the year of COVID. We did not have vaccines yet. But then this phenomenon seemed to explode for most of the embalmers in the year 2021. Now, I can't say that correlation is not necessarily causation, right? But it is a strange timing between the COVID-19 vaccines and the appearance of these white fibrous clots. I have another sample in my pocket here, a little bit larger one. This is a 6-inch clot that was taken out of a dead person as well. So what I've been doing the last 3 years since I retired from the my job is I've been doing worldwide embalmer blood clot surveys. Embalmers all over the world say they're finding these unusual clots. Most of them have 20 or 30 years of experience. Never saw this phenomenon before the years of COVID or the vaccine. Prior to 2020, embalmers would see 2 primarily types of clots. One's called grape jelly clots. They look just like grape jelly, and they dissolve easily in your hands.
Really?
They've been seeing those forever. They've also been seeing something called chicken fat clots, which are yellowish in color, smaller, and they tear very easily. These clots, so these white fibrous clots, are large. They're tough. They're rubbery. They're nothing like the chicken fat clots. And so, in fact, Dr. John Campbell, who's interviewed me on his YouTube channel, and that video is still up. People can go watch interviews I've done with Dr. John Campbell. He's looked through 6 or 7 of his old pathology books, Dana, and he can't find any photographs of these white fibrous clots. He can see plenty of the grape jelly or chicken fat clots, but he's saying, Tom, this is a new phenomenon.
What are we looking at here? Like that white thing in there, that's the clot? Or
that's the clot.
That's the clot?
That is the clot.
That long?
Yes. This particular one that I'm holding up here, this was removed from the abdominal aorta.
So this is in someone's veins or arteries?
And causing strokes and heart attacks. That's why the film was called Died Suddenly. And that's how I got involved, Dana.
So that's not a vein. That's literally
that is the clot taken out of actually out of an artery. Yeah.
That's crazy, man. How much? Like,
this is one of the ones on the larger side. Most of them are this size in the smaller vial.
So is that just one, or is that multiples in there?
This is one.
That's one.
One taken out of a corpse.
One inside of someone's body.
Yeah.
These look like these. Can I hold this?
Absolutely.
This looks like an alien. Like, I don't know what this looks like, man. This is freaking out.
Yeah. What we think is happening is we think that the spike protein from either the virus or the one produced by the vaccine may be interacting in an unusual way with our body's natural fibrinogen. We all have a protein in our body called fibrinogen, and it's in a liquid form in your blood plasma. Whenever there's damage, though, that's done to what's called the endothelial lining of your veins and arteries, it's a thin inner layer of cells on the inner walls of your veins and arteries. Whenever there's damage done to that, it triggers a normal clotting response. So the fibrinogen is supposed to convert into a white solid called fibrin. But what we think is happening instead from the scientists we're working with is that instead it's combining with the spike protein to form this bizarre polymer instead. Wow. And we think that the lipid nanoparticle almost also may be getting involved in the process as well.
Who's studying this stuff?
Scientists around the world. Unfortunately, they're working with universities, and the people at the universities do not want to be mentioned by name because they're afraid if they talk about it, then they can lose their grants and funding.
Well, hopefully there's, with a new sheriff in town, that's going to change.
Yeah. So what I did is I watched that movie Died Suddenly. It premiered in November of 2022, the week of Thanksgiving. And that movie, you can still find it on Rumble. It's about an hour-long documentary. And these 6 or 7 embalmers in that film said they were seeing the usual fibrous clots. Well, I wasn't sure if they were a bunch of kooks or not. So the next day after I watched the movie, I watched it the night it premiered. I got up the very next day and I called the Ohio Association. They're in Cincinnati, Ohio, about an hour south of where I live in Dayton. And I talked to their now president, Mr. Woody Wilson. And Woody told me, Tom, I'm seeing the white fibrous clots too. So there I said, wow, now I have an official officer, the president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, corroborating these 6 or 7 embalmers.
Are they tracking out of these corpses the people that got the vaccine? Is there a correlation between the vaccine, or is this?
We don't know for sure because most embalmers never get a chance to ask the question. Because their job is they're in the back room preparing the body for showing an open casket funeral, then buried. There are a lot of funeral directors like Mr. Woody Wilson himself. He's a funeral director and an embalmer, does his own embalming. And some of the embalmers that I talked to who are also funeral directors, they do get a chance to talk to the family. And behind the clots, they'll ask the person, hey, did your loved one take the COVID-19 vaccine? And they tell me 100% of the time without fail, the answer is yes. Again, that's anecdotal.
Do they ask them which brand it is?
They may have. Yeah.
So if I may.
Yes.
This is the type of thing that we're looking at. Instead of sending money to drag shows in foreign countries and doing a new Sesame Street in what country was it? The Sesame Street? Like all this government fraud that Elon is finding. They need to be studying this, and they need to be having anybody that's found with this. They need to track to determine the correlation between that and the vaccine, or that and the disease.
And what I've done every year that I've had the embalmer survey done, all 3 years, I've sent the results to the FDA, CDC, and NIH. Dana, crickets. Nothing from them back in the 3 years I've done the survey. They won't contact me. They won't even do any. And why aren't they doing their own surveys? I'm a retired Air Force guy. I shouldn't have to do this, right?
Right.
The FDA, the CDC should be looking at. In addition to them, funeral director associations around the country, because it's the length of the process it takes to do an embalming. Embalming used to take about an hour to an hour and a half to do a typical embalming. Now, when they find a body that's riddled with these clots, it takes about 2.5 hours to do an embalming because they have to keep stopping and using multiple injection site points in order to pull all these clots out.
Get through the clots.
Right. To get the formaldehyde in all the appendages.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So what's interesting is we also know this is happening in the living as well, Dana, because I've been in touch with a
Oh,
endovascular specialist and cardiologist in Jacksonville, Florida, who's been pulling these same white fibrous clots out of living people for the last 4 years. There's also a doctor in the UK. His name is Dr. Philip McMillan. He has a YouTube channel, and he's also found his own cath lab whistleblower, a catheterization lab. A cath lab is where living people go to get clots removed.
Yeah.
And up until 2020, it was the grape jelly clots and the chicken fat clots, the easier ones to remove. Now these vascular surgeons, endovascular specialists, and cardiologists are having to remove these white fibrous clots from their patients. And it's much tougher, because the first thing the person does when they come into their lab is they give them clot busting drugs like tissue plasminogen activator. It's called TPA. And that does a great job on breaking down the grape jelly clots and the chicken fat clots, but it doesn't touch these white fibrous clots. So then they have to go in flexible catheters, either scrape the clot out, suck it out, or lasso the clot and pull it out.
Where did this one come from? Like, what part of the body?
This one came out of the abdominal aorta, one of the largest vessels in your body. It goes kind of straight down your trunk here. That's why it's so wide and thick, because the
What does this weigh?
Most
Is it light, or is it like heavy, or?
They're usually actually fairly light, but they're rubbery. They're elastic. The embalmers describe them when they have them in their hands. They say they look like calamari, and they feel like a rubber band. They can actually stretch a little bit without breaking, and then come back to shape again. So,
holy cow!
Yeah, that's why and the scientific tests have been done to show that the clots are not made of, like I said, of usual blood components like potassium, magnesium, and iron. That's why they don't have a red color. Regular blood, iron's what gives blood its red color. These instead have large amounts of phosphorus in them, which is interesting because one of the components of the COVID vaccines is phosphorus. There are phosphates in the COVID vaccine.
Really?
And there's also phosphorus in our body as well.
You think it's the vaccine that's turning into this thing, or?
Well, like I said, I think it's a spike protein problem, regardless of where the spike protein comes from, whether it comes from the virus or from the vaccine. That's personal opinion. It hasn't been proven yet, but the evidence I've gotten from my 3 surveys is pretty overwhelming. There's an issue here.
So there's multiples throughout the body on people. They're not just like having a seed and it just grows, and
they're finding them everywhere. Some bodies are riddled with the clots, others just have a few in them. Some of them don't even have this effect. It has another effect called what the embalmers call coffee grounds. As they're draining the blood off the corpse and trying to get the formaldehyde in, they'll see what looks like coffee grounds in the drainage coming off the corpse in the blood. And that's an indication of another phenomenon called microclotting that occurs at the capillary level, the very small blood vessels in our body. And that can be just as dangerous as the white fibers, because it can block the exchange of oxygen at the lungs, and then they're carrying that oxygen to all the major organs of the body, including your brain and your eyes.
They need to be tracking the cause of death of all these people.
And people are dying suddenly with strokes and heart attacks. People are also getting
brain fog. If you've got something like this in your brain or in your heart.
So I tell people, if you start to feel symptoms like unusual fatigue, tightness in your chest, shortness of breath, brain fog,
did you get the vaccine?
Vision problems. I did not. No,
I didn't either.
No, because I did research. Our own CDC wasn't putting out good information, but the UK was. They were putting early in the fall of 2021. They had a document out that showed there were hundreds of thousands of breakthrough cases of COVID amongst the fully vaccinated by the early fall of 2021. So, at the same time here in America, they were telling us this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. So they were lying to us here.
Right.
While in other places, like I said, their version of the CDC over in the UK was admitting that the fully vaccinated were transmitting the disease just as quickly as the unvaccinated.
Do they do blood tests and see if people are low in potassium?
No, but there are several blood tests you can do to see if you have vascular damage going on inside you, these clots forming. One test that can be done is a common test called a D-dimer test that tests for clotting. There's another test called VEGF, which tests for damage to the endothelial lining that we talked about earlier of your blood vessels. And a third one called a CD40 ligand test, which tests for platelet activation, because your platelet counts can get really off if you've got this clotting going on inside you. So
I can imagine.
Scientists are looking at it, and that's why I'm here. I'm trying to get the word out about it, because this is still an issue, right?
Yeah.
Because Big Pharma's not stopping. They've got mRNA vaccines using the same lipid nanoparticle technology planned for RSV virus, the shingles shot, the bird flu, the regular flu, more COVID shots.
Wow.
They want to transfer to this technology going forward, because they know they can get used to be able to get easy approval from the FDA and the CDC. Now the approval process may be a little tougher now that RFK Jr. and Jay Bhattacharya are in charge of the NIH and the HHS. So,
Have you talked with RFK or anybody up?
I haven't talked with Bobby, but I've been sending emails to him. He actually interviewed Richard Hirschman, who was the main embalmer in the Died Suddenly movie. So Bobby is aware from of my 3 surveys, and he's also personally talked to the lead embalmer who's been finding these clots. So he knows of the existence of this particular, and it is the most spectacular side effect of the vaccines. Remember, this is only one we're talking about, right? There's also myocarditis, nerve damage, miscarriages, turbo cancers.
What is myocarditis?
Myocarditis is an inflammation of the heart muscle,
Mhm.
and then pericarditis is the inflammation of the sac around the heart. So what's interesting about that is a few years ago, a study was done in Thailand. It's called a prospective study. They took a look at 301 high school students.
Mhm.
They gave them EKGs and MRIs and checked their what's called troponin levels, and they saw their hearts were in perfect shape. Then they gave all the 301 students 2 shots of Pfizer. Then they did EKGs, MRIs, and checked their troponin levels again. You know what they found? They found seven of the 301 kids. One of them had full-blown myocarditis. 3 of them had pericarditis, an inflammation of the sac around the heart, and the other 3 had what's called subclinical myocarditis. So 7 of those kids got heart damage after receiving two shots of the Pfizer vaccine. So that's 1 out of every 43, Dana. Does that sound rare to you?
No, that's a problem.
And like I said, these white fibrous clots are being found in 27% of corpses. Does that sound rare to you?
No.
1 out of 4
That's
corpses.
a problem.
It's a problem, right? It's definitely worthy of investigation, right? So I'm going to stay on the CDC and the FDA and the NIH until they do a full-blown investigation. Because when I did my surveys, I tried to do them as unbiasedly as possible. When I did the embalmer surveys, for example, all 3 of them, I never mentioned the words COVID or COVID vaccine anywhere in the questions of my survey. I didn't want to lead the witness.
Yeah.
I only asked them, what are you seeing? What did you see it? And how much are you seeing? What percentage of your corpses are you seeing this phenomenon in? So I try to keep, and I sent it to as many blue states. I sent it to the survey to like Ohio, Florida, Texas. Then I also sent it to California, Illinois, New York, Massachusetts.
Nice.
So,
how many surveys did you send?
3. I did one at the end of 2022.
I mean, how many responses?
I got 301 to my latest survey. And one of the interesting things about it is my best performer from the year prior to that, my 2023 survey, was the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association. In just 2 days, I got 125 responses from embalmers through the state of Pennsylvania alone, because they sent out my survey to their membership to take. This year, however, they declined to take my survey.
Why?
In spite of the fact that their own president sent me an email saying that he's seeing unusual clotting in his corpses. Get that. The president of the association is seeing unusual clotting, yet they failed to send the survey out again this year when they sent it out last year. I think one of the reasons is if you're a funeral director and you mandated that all your employees take the COVID-19 vaccine, including your embalmers, would you want them to take a survey that might show a link between the COVID-19 vaccine and these white fibrous clots? You might be setting yourself up for a liability suit.
Maybe.
Also, we know from the CDC that 80% of American adults over the age of 18 took at least the first 2 jabs back in 2021.
80%?
80% of adults over the age of 18.
No kidding.
Yeah. So these most of these funeral director association presidents, they probably took the jabs themselves. They may have a little cognitive dissonance. They may not want to know the answer to the questions that I'm asking.
I want to know.
Me too.
And it doesn't affect me personally, theoretically.
So I think we have enough here to say, Houston, we have a problem. I think we have a signal here. And what's frustrating is the CDC and the FDA. They say, well, we're checking our VAERS database, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, and we don't see a signal. You look at that database, there's all kinds of deaths and all kinds of, clotting going on and myocarditis going on and cancers, turbo cancers that are being reported. And we believe that database is actually about underreported by a factor of about 26 to 30. So yes, one of the reasons we think that's happening, Dana, is in addition to the VAERS system, the CDC had another system called vSafe. It was a downloadable app that people could download on their smartphones, and 10 million Americans did download that app on their smartphone to talk about their vaccine experience.
Well, if they're downloading that, they probably had a problem.
Well, 800,000 of them, which is 800,000 out of the 10 million, had a severe adverse event that they either had to go to the emergency room, urgent care, or schedule a doctor's appointment to resolve it.
Oh my goodness.
What's interesting though, all of those 1,000 people, they should have filed a corresponding VAERS report in the VAERS system. only 30,000 of them did, of the 800,000. That's a
Wow.
factor of 26. That's why I
Yeah.
say that's somewhat proof using the CDC's own two systems
Yeah.
that the underreporting of errors is about a factor of 26. So
Tom, keep up the good work. Stay on this.
the last thing
I
want
appreciate it.
The last thing I tell your people is, whether our government comes through for us or not, you, the individual, you have the wherewithal to say no, right? Do your own research. It's okay to do your own research, find out what's going on, and then make your own decision as to whether you want to take any more mRNA-based vaccines or not. I can't prove it's happening, but the data that I've collected in my surveys over the last 3 years strongly indicates that we've got a problem.
And again, for the sake of YouTube, so that you don't strike our channel, please don't strike our channel, YouTube. But just a matter of opinion, and we're just showing evidence that has been researched. And Tom, really appreciate you coming on. Definitely make sure we've got your contact information, because I want to keep in touch with you and stay abreast of this, and have you on periodically if you would be so kind.
Absolutely, Dana. Love to.
I really appreciate what you're doing for our country and for the people in it. And I don't know if you guys can see these things, but this long, this is the clot. This isn't like a piece of vein with like a little dot in it. This is the clot. So nuts. Here's the other one. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, right? But very concerning. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dana.
All right, so stay tuned. We're going to be staying live. Vice President J.D. Vance is about to open the ceremonies. This is live from CPAC in Maryland, Washington, D.C. This is the Lawyer Dana Show. Thank you, Tom. Man,
my pleasure, man.
Man, it was great to